I served 3 years as empress and 20 as empress dowager. After my death, my children and grandchildren gathered around, while ministers wept at my funeral. By all accounts, a life like mine should hold no regrets. Yet when given another chance at life, when my grandmother asked whom I would choose as husband, I did not select the crown prince. Instead, I chose Prince.Yet, who guarded the frontier. From that day onward, though worlds apart, I wished only to be with him, never to meet again. In the bamboo courtyard, the air hung still enough to hear a pin drop. Wispy incense smoke rose from the burner, veiling my grandmother's piercing gaze. She scrutinized me from head to toe, as if trying to see through me. You've always been fond of the crown prince. Why did you not choose him? Kneeling on the ground, I replied in a solemn voice. Precisely because I am fond of him. I cannot marry him. Your granddaughter refuses to torment herself, to tear her heart apart waiting for one who will never return. I beg you, grandmother, grant me this favor. A long while passed, until my knees grew faint from kneeling. Finally, I heard grandmother sigh deeply, her voice softening. Very well. Tomorrow when I enter the palace, I shall report to His Majesty and arrange a marriage for you. I remained prostrate, bowing my head once more. This lifetime, I would not marry Li Jincheng. 2 days later, Chang'an Street bustled with crowds as lively as ever. I went out shopping as usual, only to have my carriage halted mid-street by the crown prince emerging from the palace. He pulled the reins tight, leaping down from his horse with fluid grace, as dashing and handsome as ever. Yet he frowned at me, his voice icy. I hear you sought an imperial decree for a marriage? Xin Yushu, are you so impatient? His cold gaze stung my eyes, turning my head slightly to avoid his stare. I murmured softly, Your Highness, rest assured, this marriage has nothing to do with you. His expression grew more terrifying. He sneered coldly. Nothing to do with me? I've taken your body. Who else would dare marry you? Had I known you'd be this clingy, I shouldn't have saved you during that bandit uprising. I closed my eyes, drew a deep breath, and steadied my voice. Your Highness, please don't be angry. It truly isn't. Enough. His words cut me off. Furious, he flung himself onto his horse, towering over me. I will marry you and grant you the honor of crown princess. As for anything else, you may forget it. With that, he glanced back at the green sedan chair behind him, barked move, and rode off. I was left alone in the bustling marketplace, coughing from the choking dust kicked up by his departure. The green sedan chair passed by. A pale white hand lifted the curtain, revealing a familiar profile. It was my younger half-sister. I shook my head with a bitter smile and climbed into my own carriage. Once childhood sweethearts, I couldn't fathom how we'd ended up like this. He used to be the one who protected me most fiercely, calling me Sister Shu constantly. At palace banquets, if he didn't see me, he'd inquire about my whereabouts with grandmother. When did things begin to change? Probably after he rescued me from bandits. He held me, panicked and fearful, dreading any harm might come to me. Yet his expression darkened the moment he heard the empress intended to betroth me to him. After that, whenever anyone mentioned our verbal engagement, his face would cloud over, and he would ignore me. At first, I couldn't understand why. It wasn't until the night of my half-sister's wedding to Prince.Yet in my past life, when he was drunk and stared at her miniature portrait all night long, that I realized he had long since loved someone else, just not me. In my past life, after Prince.Yet passed away, my younger sister was sent to guard the Imperial tomb. At their final meeting, separated by their statuses, they gazed at each other across the banquet hall. Speechless and choked with emotion, their love was truly profound. So in this life, I resolved to let them be together. When I returned to the mansion, grandmother was already waiting for me. She lay with her eyes half closed, a maid gently patting her shoulders beside her. She appeared much the same as ever, yet I knew her heart was heavy. Sure enough, upon hearing my footsteps, she opened her eyes and scrutinized me from head to toe. "Have you been injured anywhere?" My heart softened, and I shook my head. She sat up straight, her face taut as she looked at me. "Today, the crown prince sent word that he intends to marry Yuqing as his consort Liang. The empress dowager has already agreed." Yuqing, my younger half-sister. I froze. This had never happened in my past life. Where had things gone wrong? Grandmother was still smiling, though the smile didn't reach her eyes. I intended for her to be the principal consort. Yet she eagerly offers herself as a secondary wife. Had I not promised His Majesty to conceal your marriage? First, I'd have loved to see her expression when she finds out. I fell silent, saying nothing. In my past life, grandmother married me to the crown prince while Yuqing became the principal consort of Princeton. Given grandmother's tactics this lifetime, if I were to marry Princeton, she would surely scheme to send Yuqing to be the crown prince's consort. Alas, she chose to be a secondary consort. Her previous words stirred something within me. Does grandmother know why His Majesty insisted on concealing the marriage, and how long this secrecy must last? Grandmother pondered briefly before replying. Since the Empress's passing, His Majesty's attitude toward the Crown Prince has changed. He likely harbors suspicions. She turned to me. It won't be concealed much longer. When Princeton returns to the capital next month, he will surely announce the marriage. I silently calculated the days. Thankfully, it was only a little over 10 days. Yuqing's wedding was set for 3 days hence. The Crown Prince intended to take her as a concubine before his own wedding, both to curry favor with his beloved and to deliver a warning shot across my bow. Because the marriage was rushed and she was merely a secondary consort, the wedding banquet was not particularly grand. Yet the Crown Prince came personally to escort her, even bringing a pair of geese he'd hunted himself, a clear display of favor for Yuqing. The usually austere listening bamboo courtyard was now adorned with festive lanterns and decorations, radiating joy. But upon closer inspection, none of the silk robes, trunks, or trousseau items were true crimson. Even the bride's ceremonial veil was a pale peach hue. I watched the joy on the Crown Prince's face crack and shatter, only to force itself back into a semblance of happiness. My gaze drifted downward to their clasped hands, one radiating festive cheer, the other shy and timid. Catching my glance, he tilted his chin defiantly, tightening his grip on the woman beside him. I shifted my gaze away without a flicker of emotion, ignoring his petty behavior. Only after leaving bamboo listening garden, beyond my grandmother's sight, did the Crown Prince yank me into a corner with vicious force. "Xin Yushu, why are you so consumed by jealousy now? You won't even let Yuqing wear red for her veil. As if you fear the world won't know she's merely a concubine? How can you expect her to hold her head high when you stab her heart like this?" My brows knitted tightly as I flung his arm away. "Your Highness, is it not fitting for a secondary wife to wear peach blossom pink?" "How could it be fitting? Yuqing is. What is she?" I fixed him with a steady gaze, my expression a mocking smile. His face flushed crimson. Speechless. I knew exactly what he wanted to say, that Yuqing was the apple of his eye. How could she be treated like any other? I spoke slowly and deliberately. "If your Highness feels she's been wronged, you could petition His Majesty to make her crown princess." It was perfectly natural for a concubine to wear peach blossom pink. What was he fussing about? If you truly fear wronging your most cherished one, why did you not petition His Majesty sooner to wed her? In the end, it boils down to cowardice. As expected, he flew into a rage, glaring at me with a cold sneer. "So this is the behavior of the eldest daughter of the Duke's household. Since you refuse to spare Yuqing any dignity, then on our wedding day, do not blame me for sparing none for you." I remained non-committal. Just then, Yuqing approached him. I turned aside and invited him to leave. "Your Highness, please be gone." He snorted coldly and swept away. Yuqing didn't immediately follow him. She halted and looked at me, a rather smug smile on her face. "Sister, did the prince scold you because of me again?" "My apologies." She leaned close to my ear. her voice barely a whisper. Sister, who do you think will become empress this time around? Xin Yuqing had also been reborn. I closed my eyes and sighed softly. In our past life, she married Prince.Yet, a military commander. He was cold and unfeeling, knowing nothing of cherishing a woman's grace. Whenever Yuqing saw me, she would glare at me with hatred, as if I had stolen her perfect match. So in this life, she reached out to Li Jincheng early on, becoming his secondary consort. She wanted to enter the Eastern Palace before me, to plan ahead. The trajectory of fate diverged from that point onward. Though little did she know, I never once considered marrying the crown prince. Her schemes against me were destined to come to naught. In the days that followed, I remained indoors, preparing for the upcoming wedding. I always felt a sense of guilt toward Prince.Yet. He, the crown prince, and I had all grown up together since childhood. Yet my heart belonged solely to the crown prince. Prince.Yet, taciturn and reserved, was often overlooked by me. I still remember him standing in that gloomy dungeon, his dark eyes holding an emotion I couldn't decipher. Ah Zhu, if I became emperor, would you marry me? I didn't answer, nor could I. Prince.Yet gathered troops under his command, suspected of harboring disloyal ambitions. Li Jincheng lured him to the capital in my name and had him killed. That was his fate in the previous life. May this lifetime bring us both peace. After the final stitch, I unfolded the newly embroidered dragon phoenix cloud-patterned red veil and blew on it gently. Grandmother always said my embroidery was poor, so I specifically studied under the artisans at the treasure pavilion. This is my finest work. His Highness the Prince.Yet. He should like it, right? My heart brimmed with anticipation, yet I never imagined my labor of love would be so utterly desecrated. When I rushed back to the treasure pavilion to retrieve the veil, the embroiderer smiled and told me the crown prince had taken it. Seeing my darkening expression, the embroiderer looked at me puzzled. His Highness heard you embroidered a red veil for him and was delighted to see it. What's wrong, miss? Is there something amiss? I closed my eyes, suppressing the rage surging within, then stormed out. After questioning countless people, I finally located Li Jincheng. Guards cautiously blocked my path, explaining the crown prince and his secondary consort were flying kites and my presence might be inappropriate. I pushed him aside with a cold laugh. Across the green expanse of lawn, a woman was launching a kite. Her pale fingers stretched high into the sky before being swiftly grasped by another large hand. She nestled shyly into his embrace, giggling coyly. My sudden appearance interrupted their playful banter. The crown prince's expression darkened as he eyed me warily. What brings you here? I extended my hand, cutting straight to the point. The red veil. Give it back. His brow furrowed slightly. It's gone. You'll have to embroider a new one. My face darkened instantly. Before I could speak, Yuqing giggled first, covering her mouth with a handkerchief. Her beautiful eyes twinkling, she pointed skyward. Speaking of which, sister, the red veil you embroidered is truly beautiful. It's the only kite of its kind in the entire capital. Following her gaze, I froze, struck as if by lightning. The kite she held, its strings taut, was fashioned from my very own red veil. The crimson brocade thread stood out vividly against the azure sky. Even the auspicious clouds rendered with lifelike detail. Li Jincheng. He dared use my heart's blood to win over his beloved. Blood rushed to my head, and I felt myself drowning in a raging torrent of fury. The injustices of both past and present lives poured forth like a flood, nearly crushing me. Uncontrollably, I shoved him away violently, nearly screaming at the top of my lungs. That's mine. How could you? He staggered from my push, his angry accusation halting abruptly as he met my flushed eyes. He'd never seen me this enraged before. Momentarily frozen, unsure how to react. After a long pause, he frowned and spoke stiffly. All right. It was meant for me anyway. As long as it pleases me. Why get so worked up? I don't want this one. Start over and make me a new one. Shaking with fury, I fought back the tears welling in my eyes and suppressed the sob in my throat. Staring at him, I said slowly and deliberately, "Who said this red veil was embroidered for you?" He froze abruptly. After a moment's hesitation, the fleeting trace of remorse on his face gave way to mockery. "So you've learned to play hard to get. Shinyushu? With the betrothal ceremony imminent. Can't you just calm down? It's just a red veil. When we marry, you'll still have to beg me to lift it for you. Why make such a fuss?" I drew a deep breath, suppressing the violent heaving of my chest. Turning, I snatched the bow and arrows from the guard's hands. With a swift upward motion, I drew the string taut. A sharp whistling sound filled the air as the arrow shot forth. Almost simultaneously, the delicate kite dancing in the sky shattered instantly. Amid the tearing sound of the blade piercing through the brocade, the red veil was utterly destroyed. The crown prince stared at me in disbelief, too stunned to speak. Beside him, Yuqing, startled, covered her ears and cowered in his embrace. In the air that seemed to freeze, I fixed my gaze on him, my face utterly expressionless. "Between your highness and me, this brocade remains. From this day forward, our ties are severed." With that, I turned away without another word, discarding bow and arrows behind me. From behind, I heard Yuqing's voice, trembling with tears. "Your Highness, it's all my fault. I thought sister would be delighted to see you turn her feelings into a kite. I never imagined. Sister seems very angry. Should your Highness go comfort her?" I felt a burning gaze fixed upon me. After a brief silence, a hoarse, irritated male voice spoke. "Ignore her. She'll be fine once we're married." I thought that even if we couldn't be husband and wife in this life, at least we had over a decade of affection between us. Unexpectedly, his every action and manner seemed terrifyingly unfamiliar. It was as if I wasn't the childhood sweetheart he had cherished for over 10 years, but his enemy. Returning to the Duke's residence, I gathered all the things that had once connected me to him and stored them away in the storeroom. It was time for me to start a new life. A life without Li Jincheng. The next day, the secondary consort returned to her natal home, accompanied personally by the crown prince. Yuqing affectionately linked arms with grandmother, her movements intimate. The crown prince's gaze lingered on me, almost imperceptibly. Seeing no reaction from me, he covered his mouth and gave Yuqing a light cough. Yuqing pursed her lips before instructing a maid to present 2 bolts of brocade. She shot me a meaningful glance before addressing grandmother. These 2 pieces of floating light brocade were procured with great effort by His Highness. I wonder if grandmother finds them to her liking? My eyebrows twitched slightly. Floating light brocade, the very fabric used for my embroidered bridal veil. One piece was deep blue, the other a vivid crimson. Grandmother always favored deep blue, so this one was naturally for her. As for the other, I pressed my lips together, my dark eyes deepening. Grandmother understood clearly and replied softly. "The prince is very thoughtful." The gaze fixed on me grew more pronounced. Perhaps fearing I hadn't grasped his meaning, Li Jincheng murmured a reminder. "This pure red would suit Yushu perfectly." In front of grandmother, I said nothing, merely nodding slightly. Only after leaving the courtyard did Li Jincheng stop me. He looked at me, his voice tinged with awkwardness. "This brocade is specifically for you. Enough to make many veils." I halted and met his gaze directly. "Your Highness, I have no need for it." His brow furrowed sharply, his entire aura darkening as his voice dropped several degrees. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. Your Highness, this brocade is unnecessary to me. You may take it back or give it to another, dispose of it as you see fit. His face darkened terribly, his dark eyes blazing with fury. His words practically snarled through clenched teeth. Shin Yushu, how long do you intend to keep this up? You were the one who insisted on marrying me. And now you're the one causing trouble. I've already forgiven you for forcing this marriage. Yet here you are playing hard to get. Don't you fear that in my anger, I might refuse to marry you at all? I took a step back, about to speak, but remembered my grandmother's warning. My lips pressed tightly together, and I said nothing, only retreating further into the corner. My silence, in his eyes, became the stubborn resilience of one cowering in a corner. His brow relaxed, and he chuckled softly. All right. What's the big deal? Was it really worth holding a grudge this long? I've already asked Father. The Imperial decree for our marriage will come within the next couple of days. You'd better prepare yourself. What? I snapped my head up, eyes wide as I stared at him. Was Prince.Yet returning? My shocked expression amused him. His mood lifted instantly as he teased. I knew you'd be pleased to hear this. You clearly longed to marry me all along, yet insisted on severing ties. Shin Yushu, you've grown ever more adept at manipulating me. Very well. Though I have no affection for you, your insistence on marrying only me, coupled with His Majesty's approval of you as Crown Prince Consort and your family's status matching mine, compels me to reluctantly consent to this union. But once you enter this household, you must not act like yesterday, fighting over trivial matters and frightening Yuqing. Should it happen again, I shall show you no such leniency. He spoke animatedly, his words flowing freely. My thoughts, however, drifted far away. I paid little heed to his words, merely nodding absently before finding an excuse to leave. Lingzhu Courtyard. The moment I entered, I met grandmother's beaming face. I opened my mouth. Grandmother. I heard. She nodded, her gaze softening as she replied. I only just learned it myself. Prince.Yet's plans have changed. He won't be going to Tongzhou. He's already reached Jingqing and should return to the capital by tomorrow evening at the latest. My heart skipped a beat, suddenly gripped by unease. Yushu, once the betrothal is granted, there is no turning back. Do you regret it? Grandmother's concerned gaze was close before me. I clenched my fists and declared with unwavering resolve. Grandmother, your granddaughter has no regrets. The day Prince.Yet entered the capital was a late afternoon. The main street was filled with jubilant citizens lining both sides to welcome him. Towering buildings flanked the road, packed with people of every sort, all vying for a glimpse of the commander-in-chief, His Royal Highness Prince.Yet. Through the carved window lattice, I spotted the man at the very front of the crowd, surrounded like the moon amidst stars, clad in silver-white light armor. He sat astride a mighty steed, his expression unreadable. Stern as a war god, whether he sensed my gaze or not, he lifted his head as if aware. Our eyes met, and a chill ran through my body. I stumbled back, drew the curtains, my heart pounding relentlessly. That evening came the victory banquet. As the lamps were lit, the hall glowed with brilliant light, filled with song and dance. The emperor sat enthroned on the dais. To his immediate left sat the crown prince, and to his right, Prince.Yet. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the emperor raised his cup to toast Prince.Yet's great victory. Beside the crown prince, Yuqing sat demurely at his side, quietly pouring wine and serving dishes, every gesture delicate and considerate. By protocol, a secondary consort like her would never be seated beside the crown prince at such a court banquet, yet there she sat, a clear testament to his favor. Just as I turned away, our eyes met. His gaze held a hidden meaning, warning lay thick within his stare. Suddenly, I recalled how he had specifically stopped me before the banquet, speaking with solemn gravity. Last night, Yuqing wept all night, saying that since she became my concubine, His Majesty would surely arrange a marriage for her at today's banquet. After you receive the Imperial decree, you should promptly request that the Emperor grant Yuqing a title. With a title and her name on the Imperial registry, she will feel more secure. After all, she is your own sister. It is only right that you request this decree. At that moment, I was so exasperated I nearly laughed. Why doesn't your highness request the title yourself? His eyes flickered. Father has been distant toward me lately. He trailed off, then warned me with displeasure. Just do as I say. The marriage decree comes today. You wouldn't want any complications, would you? My thoughts snapped back as Li Jincheng continued watching me, his gaze involuntarily darting toward the emperor, as if reminding me. I avoided his direct stare and turned my head away, ignoring how his hand gripping the wine cup suddenly tightened. After 3 rounds of wine, the emperor finally surveyed the crowd below the dais and spoke slowly. Today, I have another piece of good news to announce. The crown prince and princess have both reached marriageable age. After much deliberation, I have selected 2 noble ladies to be bestowed upon them. Silence fell over the hall. The crown prince leaned back in his chair, his expression indifferent, as if daring the emperor to humiliate him publicly if he refused to comply. Prince N, meanwhile, kept his head bowed, nonchalantly twirling his wine cup. Yet his lips pressed into a thin line and the veins bulging on his hand betrayed his tension. The emperor took it all in, then waved to the eunuch behind him. The eunuch, who had been waiting patiently, unfolded the imperial edict and began to read aloud. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, I have heard that Feng Wanwan, daughter of the Minister of Justice, possesses dignified conduct and a graceful spirit, making her a perfect match for the crown prince. She shall be betrothed as crown princess. I have also heard that Shen Yushu, eldest daughter of the Duke of Hu, is gentle, kind-hearted, and of fine character and appearance, making her a worthy consort for Princeton. She shall be granted as princess consort of Princeton. The words had barely fallen when the crown prince leapt to his feet. Father Emperor, the crown princess consort has something to say. He turned to look at me, signaling repeatedly. I was utterly baffled. My face filled with confusion. Wasn't the emperor's edict clear enough? Seeing my silence, he shot me a fierce glare before turning back to the emperor. Father Emperor, the crown princess consort is deeply concerned for her younger sister and wishes to petition for a title for Yuqing. What is your will on this matter? This time, not just me, but everyone in the palace stared at the crown prince in shock. Had the crown prince lost his mind? Yuqing, however, bit her lower lip, glancing at the crown prince with words unsaid, whether from sorrow or joy. It was unclear. Feng Wanwan, daughter of the Minister of Punishment, stepped forward, her smile not reaching her eyes. Your Highness, this servant has no younger sister named Yuqing. And forgive my impertinence, but Xin Yuling is unworthy of the title of Crown Prince's consort. The Crown Prince, already irritable, instantly turned cold. What business is it of yours? Thud. The emperor expressionlessly slammed his cup onto the table and spoke coldly. Lai Fu, read the imperial edict to our crown prince once more. I lowered my head. Clearly, Li Jincheng, overconfident and preoccupied with Yuqing's title, hadn't heard the edict at all. The eunuch's distinctive voice drifted across the hall once more. I watched the crown prince's face grow paler by the inch with each syllable, until the final words, princess consort of Princeton, were spoken. He suddenly crushed the wine cup in his hand to shards. He sprang to his feet, staring at me with disbelief. His pupils contracted, his face deathly pale, as if struck by a shock. His lips trembled. How is this possible? My eyelids lowered slightly. His gaze still coiled around me like a venomous snake, nearly tearing me apart. His fists clenched, his eyes bulging. Xin Yushu, you deceived me. I did not look up. The crown prince had lost his composure in public. This was not the moment for me to speak. Sure enough, the emperor snorted coldly. If the crown prince is drunk, return to your eastern palace. He drew a deep breath, suppressing his rage, and sat back down. To be dismissed to the Eastern Palace in the midst of a palace banquet, that would truly be a loss of face for the crown prince. The music and dancing resumed. Cups raised once more. The banquet soon regained its earlier liveliness. I shook my head helplessly, my gaze inadvertently meeting Prince Anne's deep, intense stare. His lips were pressed together slightly, his eyes seeming to hold 1,000 unspoken words. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Feng Wanwan approach the crown prince with a wine cup in hand. Xin Yuqing, still clinging to the crown prince, hadn't even sat upright before the matron behind her dragged her away. Her face drained of color and terror. A scream stifled before it could escape as her mouth was covered. The crown prince, seething with rage, was about to explode when he turned and saw Matron Jing standing there, her expression stern. His anger instantly subsided. Xiao Hu Anti-Piracy Protection. Find the book Robot and select Xiao Hu for stable, reliable reading without pitfalls. After seeing Yuqing off, Matron Jing returned to Feng Wanwan's side. Only then did I realize that Matron Jing had been bestowed upon Feng Wanwan by the emperor. She was a veteran of the emperor's court, few dared to cross her lightly. Her words just now reflected his majesty's will. As Yuqing was escorted out of the palace, she still struggled desperately, pleading glances toward the crown prince. Seeing his silence, she shot me a vicious glare before being led away. I raised an eyebrow, speechless. How could this be blamed on me? Sighing, I felt stifled and took my maid out for some fresh air. The corners of my eyes lifted slightly as I cast a subtle glance toward the direction of Prince An. When his gaze met mine, I swiftly looked away and walked out calmly. The Imperial garden glowed brightly at night, its faint fragrance wafting to my nose, refreshing and soothing. A deep male voice sounded from behind me. You sought me out. My body stiffened, once again witnessing the blunt honesty of a warrior. Seeing me bite my lip in flustered annoyance, his bright eyes dimmed, his voice growing hoarse. Have you regretted it? I lifted my head, utterly confused. Regretted what? He turned his face away. His lips pressed stubbornly into a thin line. After a long moment, he finally muttered, Too late for regrets, father said. It was your own choice to marry me. Only then did I grasp his meaning. I shook my head softly with a light laugh. No, I have no regrets. Tilting my head, I smiled meaningfully. I also hope, Your Highness, that you will allow me to have no regrets in the future. His dark eyes instantly brightened. He nodded firmly, almost like a vow. I will. But we walked side by side, the silent air thick with sweetness. Only when someone called him away did I stop. Watching his retreating figure, I curved my lips. Perhaps this time I hadn't chosen wrong again. Just as I turned to return, someone blocked my path at the corner. I too was the crown prince again. Li Jincheng glared at me with bloodshot eyes, his expression vicious. Who were you with just now? I met his gaze calmly. His Royal Highness Prince An, my fiancé. He lunged forward, his face darkening into a terrifying grimace, like a raging lion. Shen Yushu, you fickle woman. Can't you live without a man? My expression hardened as I looked at him coldly. Your Highness, choose your words. Carefully. I asked the crown prince. Your Highness ought to restrain yourself. Restraint? He sneered coldly, his gaze still locked on me, his voice venomous as it erupted from his throat. I ask you, wasn't it me who begged for the imperial decree of marriage that day? From start to finish you never intended to marry me, is that right? I didn't answer. The night breeze was cool, carrying only the rustle of leaves. Li Jincheng's fury erupted as he slammed his fist into a tree trunk. His angry growl tinged with something else. Shin Yushu, how dare you deceive me? Suddenly, I found it somewhat amusing. He was the one who resented my eagerness. Yet now that I was marrying another, it was he who couldn't accept it. What was the point? I closed my eyes briefly. At the horse ranch outside the capital, the red-hooded kite soaring through the sky, that was the last remnant of our bond. Not wishing to speak further, I stepped back indifferently. Your Highness, the crown prince's consort is already chosen, and I am soon to be the princess consort of An. It would be best if we maintained some distance. Without waiting for his reply, I turned and left. Henceforth, you and the crown prince's consort shall harmonize like Qin and Essie in the palace, while I and Prince An shall maintain respectful courtesy at the frontier. From this day forth, as far apart as the southern sky and the northern earth, I only wish never to meet you again. The Astronomical Bureau calculated auspicious dates. The Crown Prince's wedding was set for August. Prince Anne's for the following June. Time was tight, and the Ministry of Rites swiftly set about preparing the Crown Prince's wedding with great fervor. After that palace banquet, the Crown Prince had calmed down considerably. I heard he was summoned by the Emperor afterward and given a thorough scolding. He seemed much more settled now, even spending more time with his future father-in-law, Minister Feng. Hearing this, I shook my head and focused on preparing for my own wedding at home. It wasn't until a month after the Crown Prince's wedding that he brought his new bride to the Temple of Unnamed Flowers to admire the blossoms. On their way, they stopped at the Jewel Pavilion to select jewelry. There, they crossed paths with me as I was out shopping for my dowry. He halted, a faint smirk playing on his lips, his eyes dripping with scorn. Well, who might this be? The fiancé of Miss Shin? Feng Wanwan frowned upon seeing me but remained silent. Behind her, however, Shin Yuqing stared at me wide-eyed, her expression a tangled mix of anger, resentment, and a hint of smug satisfaction. It was incredibly complex. I shook my head gently. Li Jincheng's tone dripped with sarcasm, his smile growing more triumphant. The husband you went to such lengths to choose? Not so impressive after all. Huh? With that, he wrapped an arm around the Crown Princess consort's shoulder and spoke in a dismissive tone. Wanner, keep your distance from her. Suddenly, the wooden stairs echoed with heavy footsteps as someone hurried up. The sound stopped, and a sugar figurine was thrust before me. Prince Anne's forehead glistened with fine beads of sweat, his eyes sparkling. As if oblivious to the people around him, he looked at me with pure, expectant hope. I bought the sugar figurine you wanted. Try it. I froze. As if frozen in place, I stared blankly at him. Prince Anne, where did he come from? He tilted his head slightly and gave me a wink. I took the candy, understanding his gesture. My eyes lowered. My face flushed with embarrassment. My voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Your Highness. Li Jincheng's open mouth twitched, then snapped shut in frustration. He snorted coldly, refused to look at me again, and stormed off, flinging his sleeves behind him. Only Shin Yuqing's gaze lingered on Prince Anne in disbelief, her eyes wide as if seeing him for the first time. Even as she was called away by a maid, her eyes still followed Prince Anne. On Chongning Street, I held the sugar figurine, biting my lower lip lightly. Why did you come? Prince Anne's face flushed slightly, his voice soft. They say betrothed couples shouldn't meet, but I couldn't rest easy without you. I followed secretly. A faint joy blossomed in my heart. His dark eyes flickered, then suddenly turned toward me. I slipped the sugar figurine into his mouth. I grinned like a little fox. Is it sweet? Forced to bite the sugar figurine, he stared straight at me, nodding blankly. My ears flushed red as I lowered my head, my voice soft yet clear enough for him to hear. I think it's sweet too. The upward curve of my lips didn't relax until I returned to the Duke's residence. Sitting by the window, a faint sorrow settled between my brows. Li Jincheng's sinister voice still echoed in my ears. As he passed me, his voice was hushed, venomous as a snake striking. If you don't want the Crown Prince's consort, you'll end up as a concubine someday. Seeing my body stiffen, a low chuckle escaped his throat. You only have eyes for me, don't you? How could I ever let you marry another? Frowning, I felt a persistent, vague unease. By the next day, that unease had grown intense. Grandmother told me the Western barbarians had invaded, and Prince Anne had returned to the northwest overnight. Before leaving, he had left me a letter. Clutching the letter, I stared at the final words, wait for me. Anshin. My heart tightened. My intuition told me Prince Anne's departure from the capital must be connected to the Crown Prince. I shared my thoughts with grandmother. After a moment's consideration, she decided to take me to the palace. In the Qianqing Palace, the emperor stood with his hands behind his back, seemingly unsurprised by our arrival. Gazing out the window, his tone was detached. The crown prince and the Western barbarians have been in contact for quite some time. Since the empress's passing, his actions have grown increasingly reckless, even using the Western barbarians as a shield against this emperor. I have given him many chances, yet he not only fails to cherish them but grows ever more unrestrained. I am deeply disappointed. Having said this, he turned his gaze fixedly upon me. Xin Yushu, would you be willing to play a part with me? By the time we emerged from the Qianqing Palace, daylight had fully broken. Ripples spread across the pond in the Imperial garden, sending waves of light across the surface. I raised my hand to shield my eyes from the glare. It seemed the wind had risen. Another month passed before news of Prince Anne's disappearance and the Western barbarians reached the capital by swift courier. As panic gripped the populace, the crown prince's influence grew even stronger. Some even proposed entrusting him with command of the Northwest armies to march against the Western barbarians and bolster military morale. Just as the Eastern Palace basked in its triumph, an imperial edict stunned everyone. Crown Prince Li Jincheng, implicated in colluding with the Western barbarians, murdering his own kin, and plotting rebellion, was imprisoned in the imperial dungeon that very night. This edict, like water dropped into boiling oil, instantly set the court and the realm ablaze. Overnight, the Eastern Palace became a prison, and the residence of Minister Feng was surrounded by imperial guards, sealed off with no one allowed to leave. Secret correspondence between the crown prince and the Western barbarian prince, along with their financial records, were presented in the Golden Hall. Every word and piece of evidence was irrefutable, leaving no room for doubt. It was clear the emperor had been investigating this for a long time before making it public and striking against the Eastern Palace. Yet, at this very moment, news arrived from the imperial guards. The crown prince in the heavenly prison was an impostor. The real crown prince had not been in the Eastern Palace for a long time. Even the concubine was a maid in disguise. By the time I learned this, he was already in a carriage bound for an unknown destination. My hands and feet were bound. Directly opposite me stood the vanished Li Jincheng. He stared at me coldly, his posture condescending. Xin Yushu, did you think I would simply fall like this? I froze for a moment, then glared at him with fury. I strained to break free of the ropes, but he maliciously pinned my hands down. Don't waste your effort, Xin Yushu. Not only will I not fall, but I intend to take you as my concubine. If you play your cards right, once I ascend the throne, I might even reward you with the title of a consort. I snorted coldly, digging my fingernails into his palm as I spat out. You dream. Not only did he not flinch, he tightened his grip, letting beads of blood seep from his palm. His gaze fixed on my face, twisted and eerie, his smile strangely savage. I never knew. I had once been husband and wife with Shuer. My heart lurched. I jerked my head up, locking eyes with his sinister gaze. In those pitch-black pupils, I saw resentment, disappointment, and an indescribable complexity. 10. The carriage journeyed for a full day and night before finally stopping. Throughout the trip, Li Jincheng wouldn't let me step down except for meals and restroom breaks. Even when I tentatively brought up my past life again, asking how he knew about it, he only looked at me with a half-smile, refusing to say another word beyond that one mention of being husband and wife in a past life. I could tell he hadn't been reborn. It must have been Yucheng who told him about my previous existence. When we disembarked, my eyes were blindfolded. Li Jincheng led me through an unknown distance before stopping. The moment the black cloth was removed, a sea of crimson flooded my vision. Dragon phoenix and mandarin duck wedding quilts. Bright red wedding candles. Even the carved wooden beams hung with double happiness characters. He watched my rapidly changing expression with keen interest. "Well, how do you find the bridal chamber I prepared for you? Unlike you, I'm not petty. Even as a concubine, I'd treat you as my primary wife." I shoved him away violently, eyes wide with fury. "The man I'm marrying is prince.N. What the hell are you doing here?" His expression darkened instantly, his gaze sharp and vicious. "Don't mention other men in my presence. Prince.N? As if he's worthy?" I took a terrified step back, accidentally bumping into the redwood wedding table behind me, gritting my teeth to suppress the rising unease. I forced myself to remain calm. "You only have Yuching in your heart. Marrying me now, aren't you afraid it will hurt her?" He curled his lips into a smile. "Is this jealousy?" "Sure. I knew it. You only have eyes for me. Marrying prince.N, you did it just to spite me. Didn't you?" His expression hardened again as he stared at me sternly. "But Xin Yushu, this time you've truly angered me. I must teach you a lesson so you'll know who you truly love. I shall take you as a concubine. You will study etiquette under Yuching for several days. Only when you learn obedience may you return to serve me." I stared in disbelief at his solemn expression. "Li Jincheng, he's gone mad. He's clearly deceiving himself." I was locked in the woodshed. Li Jincheng said he'd release me only when I came to terms with becoming his concubine. Gazing at the small patch of sky through the window, my thoughts drifted. Once more, the image of the emperor standing with his hands behind his back filled my vision. He seemed aged by several years, yet his voice remained as resolute as ever. "The crown prince has colluded with the Western barbarians, plotting to usurp the throne. His motives are twofold. First, he senses my disappointment in him and fears I might depose him. Second," he turned to me, his eyes dark as the depths, "he must ascend the throne before you marry prince.N. Xin Yushu. He cannot bear to see you wed another. Once he claims the throne, his first act will surely be to bring you into the harem. I am old. I understand little of the love affairs of your generation. But state affairs are no game. The crown prince, I cannot tolerate him. The crown prince maintains a secret military stronghold outside the palace. To my knowledge, all his dealings with the Western barbarians occur there. Though my spies have searched extensively without success, I've learned he plans another transaction with them soon. I intend to stir the hornet's nest, strike directly at the Eastern Palace. When that happens, the crown prince will be thrown into chaos. Given his devotion to you, he will not let you go. Should he send men to capture you? Would you be willing to infiltrate his camp and serve as my inside man?" Though I harbored doubts about the crown prince's supposed devotion to me, as described by the emperor, I still agreed. I felt remorse toward prince.N in my previous life. In this one, I must not let harm come to him. Even if it meant rescuing the missing prince.N, I would agree. Thus, on the night of the Eastern Palace turmoil, the emperor knew full well the crown prince was absent. He orchestrated the entire affair solely to lure him into rescuing me. A perfect trap to catch the turtle in the jar, uprooting the crown prince's support at its core. I expected Li Jincheng to hate and torment me, but never imagined he would propose marriage. This concubine role, I suppose I have no choice but to accept it. A sparrow perched on the windowsill, as if searching for food. I slipped the prepared letter into its beak. With a sharp flick of its beak, it seized the entire thing, flapped its wings, and flew away. 11. I waited 2 days. Just as I was preparing to send someone to summon Li Jincheng on the third day, an uninvited guest arrived. Xin Yuching stood heavily made up, her body terrifyingly thin beneath her luxurious robes. She looked down at me from the dilapidated woodshed outside, her voice oddly unnatural. "Long time no see, sister." I glanced up at her, then closed my eyes again. She didn't seem upset. but laughed to herself. Do you know why I've come today? Sister? His Highness sent me to persuade you to agree to marry him. Her voice trailed off, tinged with a faint, sharp edge. When I looked up again, her eyes were bloodshot. How could he be so cruel? In my past life, I was the one he loved most. She took a step forward, her eyes brimming with unmasked bitterness and rage. Shinyushu, why won't you marry him? Do you have any idea how I've lived these past days? Ever since the Imperial decree of marriage arrived, the Crown Prince has been like a madman. He humiliates me on the bed at every turn, even calling out your name to me. Once the Crown Princess finally arrived, Feng Wanwan grew even more vicious. Not only did she forbid me from seeing the crown Prince, she ordered Nanny Xing to enforce strict rules upon me. Light punishments meant kneeling and verbal abuse, while severe ones meant being beaten with a cane. The Crown Prince, he doesn't care about me at all. She glared at me with hatred, tears welling in her eyes. He's nowhere to be seen all day. Even when I cry out to him, he only scorns me, telling me to show respect to the Crown Princess consort, leaving me to be bullied by them. He wasn't like this in my past life. She crouched down to meet my gaze, enunciating each word deliberately. All this I asked because you didn't marry him. I furrowed my brow slightly. I had heard whispers of these events, but never imagined Li Jincheng could be so ruthless. Still, what did any of this have to do with me? As if reading my thoughts, she gave a cold laugh. You don't understand, do you? I couldn't figure it out either. I couldn't understand why he flew into a rage upon learning you were to marry Prince and even conspiring with the Western barbarians to risk his life. I couldn't understand why, having loved me so deeply in my past life, he now forced me to beg you to marry him. In fact, had I not reminded him of our past life's vows, he might well have abandoned me, leaving me imprisoned like Feng Wanwan, my life imperiled. I furrowed my brows, my expression unreadable. Seeing my silence, she stood up, took a deep breath, her voice still hoarse from crying. Shinyushu, why do you always make things difficult for me? In our past life, you relied on your position as empress and your family background to trap me in the Imperial tomb, never letting me escape. You forbade me from changing my name and entering the palace as a consort. Now in this life, you've gone and arranged a marriage for someone else, leaving the Crown Prince yearning for me in vain. It's made my life a living hell. She tilted her head and grinned at me. Sister, tell me, isn't His Highness pathetic? Why does he always obsess over women he can't have? Before leaving, she shot me a half-hearted glance, her eyes hollow with resignation. Sister, think it over carefully. I wouldn't mind sharing a husband with you. As for His Highness Princeton, she lowered her head, a hint of self-mockery in her voice. I always thought he was born cold-hearted and emotionless. But it turns out the one in his heart is you. With that, she shook her head and walked out the door. Upon learning I'd agreed to marry him, Li Jincheng was overjoyed. His smile stretched wide, though he quickly composed himself when he touched me. I knew it. You clearly can't let go of me. Since that's the case, I'll give you a chance, considering you can't live without me. I was released from the woodshed and placed in the courtyard next to Li Jincheng's. Occasionally, people came to prepare for the wedding. But since preparations had already begun long ago, what remained were merely trivial matters. Li Jincheng also frequently visited me. He seemed much more composed, no longer prone to sudden outbursts. He would even thoughtfully bring me things I liked. I accepted them all with a smile, occasionally drawing near in a subtle, almost imperceptible way, which only made him happier. Even when I inquired about the Western barbarians, he showed little guard. I committed it all to memory, slipped it into a bird's beak, and sent it flying far away. As the wedding drew nearer, my nerves grew tighter. According to the emperor, the day of the grand wedding would be the day the net closed. On the eve of the wedding, Li Jincheng sent a ceremonial veil. I stared at the pattern, feeling a vague sense of familiarity. I looked at him curiously. He awkwardly averted his eyes. I'm compensating you for your red veil. Only then did I notice that the pattern on this crudely stitched red veil was almost identical to the one on the red veil I'd once been used as a kite. This one, however, was noticeably rougher. Seeing me trace the stitches, he flushed and stammered awkwardly. I've only just begun learning. You mustn't laugh at me. I lowered my head, clutching it tightly, my heart a tangled knot of emotions. Some people never know to cherish what's right before them, only to regret it bitterly once it's lost. Why bother? Li Jincheng? Though called a concubine, the wedding was arranged according to the rights of a principal wife. On the day of the grand wedding, Li Jincheng took my hand, stepping into the hall he had prepared for so long. No elders or parents were present. No relatives or friends. Only cold, lifeless objects, bustling servants, and Western barbarians whose Central Plains speech I couldn't understand. Bowing to heaven and earth, Li Jincheng bowed deeply, performing the ritual with utmost sincerity. So utterly absorbed was he that when the long arrow pierced the air, he didn't even react. He stared blankly at the arrow lodged in his chest, still trying to pull me behind him for cover. Only when Prince.Yet burst in, frantically scanning me from head to toe, only then did he turn to me in disbelief, his gaze etched with bone-deep anguish. His voice trembled. Xin Yushu, you deceived me again. I stepped beside him, tearing the crimson veil from my head and returning it to him. Your Highness, some matters cannot be settled with a single word of apology. But Your Highness, in this lifetime, I forgive you. Before I could stand, he seized my wrist, his blood staining my skin. His eyes blazed, his voice trembling. I never asked you. In our past life you married me, became empress, then empress dowager. Why, in this life, did you abandon me? Was it simply because? He choked, unable to speak. Xin Yushu must have already told him about the resentment, suspicion, and superficial harmony between us. Thoughts drifted. Yes, why indeed? Perhaps because he never loved me, harboring only resentment and suspicion. Perhaps because his heart and eyes were filled solely with Xin Yushu, turning the entire harem into her substitutes, including me. Perhaps it was because he secretly poisoned me with a fertility-blocking potion, forcing me to bear another man's child. Perhaps it was because after Yuching's death, his grief turned to illness, and he soon followed her, leaving only me, a widow with an orphan child, to struggle through the chaotic times. But now, speaking of these things holds no meaning. His profound affection, in this lifetime, seemed to become a mockery. Perhaps he never truly loved anyone. His so-called affection was nothing but inner resentment and stubborn obsession. In the end, he did let go. He never waited for my answer until his dying breath. I stood up and silently gave him one last look. Farewell forever, Crown Prince brother. As I left, I encountered Xin Yushu, bound and restrained, her eyes fixed on Prince.Yet, gleaming as if seeing a lifeline. Save me, Your Highness, I'm your consort. Have you forgotten? In our past life, she killed you. We were meant to be. Her cries were muffled. Prince.Yet beside her withdrew his hand, expressionless. Enough noised. We sat side by side in the carriage returning home. Before a day had passed, guards brought news. Xin Yushu had drowned herself in the river. I looked at Prince and I knew this must be his doing. I knew he must have heard the so-called story of our past lives, yet he still didn't ask me anything. After a moment of silence, I sighed. Your Highness, is there nothing you wish to ask me? He nodded, then quickly shook his head. I don't believe what they say. I watched him quietly. What they said is all true. He lowered his gaze, his lips pressed into a thin line. After a long moment, he spoke in a muffled voice. To say I don't care is impossible, but in this life, you chose me. Thinking of that, all the messy things don't matter so much anymore. Xin Yushu, are you in such a hurry? Even if in my past life I never married Your Highness, or even caused your death. He finally looked at me, meeting my eyes directly, his voice firm. Xin Yushu, what happened in the past life doesn't matter. What matters is that in this life, you chose me. I'm happy and I treasure it. I only wish to treat you well, to walk this life by your side, never again letting you place your trust in the wrong person, never again leaving you alone and helpless. The past, let's forget it together, shall we? My face flushed hot. I bit my lip lightly. Then after a long moment, nodded. I replied with a single word, yes.by the time we returned to the capital, 2 days had passed. The emperor seemed aged considerably, his temples thick with white hair. Seeing us, he gave a faint nod. You have done well. The crown prince's case had far-reaching implications, bringing down countless people. It took another 2 months to finally purge the corruption. The Western barbarians, cowed by Prince.Yet, dared not invade for the time being. Everything seemed to return to its former prosperity and harmony. That March, Prince.Yet was named Crown Prince.Yet the 6th. Month of that same year, the crown prince married Shinyushu, the eldest daughter of the Duke of Hugwo. Flowers bloomed in profusion, ceremonial music resounded, adorned in brocaded robes and resplendent phoenix crowns. He took my hand and stepped by my side up the long staircase. This was the man I would hold hands with for the rest of my life. Crown Prince Li Qingjing, may this lifetime hold no regrets. The end.